Hi, hello, you sap-slick strangelings and root-drenched randos. I'm Khee, Locke's official Arboreal Infester, the mossy goblin voice in your earholes, and the reason your scrolls now smell like mushrooms and bad decisions. And this is another thrilling dive into the twisted tangle that is Warhammer Underworlds, a place where time doesn't work right, ghosts don't stay dead, and my boss, Chronicler Locke, half-elf, full nerd, keeps taking us to do research. This time, we're heading into the Gnarlwood, ancient forest, yes, haunted, absolutely. Cannibalistic architecture? You bet your sweet bark. So grab a torch, tie your boots extra tight, and for the love of Sigmar, don't eat anything that talks back. Let's get gnawing. Ah, the Gnarlwood. You know a place is going to be fun when the trees are carnivorous. The air tastes like wet dog and despair, and the local welcome custom is die screaming. Stretching across western Thondia like a really cranky rash, the Gnarlwood is less forest and more apex predator with roots. The trees? Feathered. The canopy? Hungry. The atmosphere? Basically a stew of mist, madness, and things that sound like they have too many teeth. It's where Gur keeps its leftovers, the parts too angry to digest. Locals know better than to enter. Unless you're a disgraced warrior, a terminally curious explorer, or just wildly horny for treasure, you stay behind the thorn palisade and don't look the brambles in the eye. Seriously, some of them blink, but... And this is the part where poor decision-making gets sexy. High above those murder bushes glinting in the light, you'll see ruins of black obsidian and gold. That's Talaxis, the ravening ruin. It's not from here, it fell from somewhere else. Somewhere not labeled on the friendly mortal maps. And now it's stuck in the branches, bleeding out secrets and curses like an open wound. Naturally, we're going in. From the notes of Chronicler Locke, clears throat and goblin. Formation: when the Seraphon void ship known as the Eye of Chotek plummeted into the realm of beasts, plummeted like an interstellar brick. Very majestic. Its geomantic engines were gravely damaged. These gigantic devices were intended to manipulate the environment surrounding the temple ship, rendering the lands more hospitable to Seraphon physiology. Which I assume means less claws in your face and more lizard tanning rocks. And to provide a bulwark to keep their enemies at bay. Ah yes, the classic Seraphon diplomatic strategy. Nice jungle. Be a shame if it ate you. The force of the crash caused the temple ship's geomantic devices to malfunction, sending out waves of realm-shaping energies and leading to a surge of uncontrolled growth. So, like, the most rampant weed growth incident in history. Over the years, these energies molded the already perilous environment of the Gnarlwood into a massive tract of almost impenetrable forest, in which carnivorous creatures grow with rapacious swiftness. Rapacious is a 10-point word for gonna chew your face off while you blink. Predatory trees are the most prolific form of life in this place, the most infamous of their kind being the gnarloaks, after which the forest is named. Because if your foliage doesn't try to disembowel you, is it even Gur? Initial exploration. The ruins of Talaxis were first discovered by famed explorer Honorio Van Talax, whose hobbies included discovering golden death traps, telling everyone about them, and then disappearing mysteriously. Classic. Van Talax spoke of entire cavernous chambers fashioned from polished gold and stairways lined with glittering jewels as big as an oryx fist. I once saw a goblin try to swallow a gem that size. She almost made it. And these were just the mundane pickings. According to legend, the techno-arcane marvels housed at the heart of the ship include artifacts that can forge objects from light, crystal-lined pools that can restore the dead to life. Which sounds amazing until the resurrected guy realizes he is in a death jungle. And vaults that can teleport you across the ruin in the blink of an eye. Legends of the Ravening Ruin spread far and wide, from Hammerhall Aksha to Excelsis and beyond, filling the minds of adventurers, sellswords, and dangerously underqualified scavengers with visions of riches and glory. Oh sure, visions of riches and glory. Right before they tripped on a vine, got eaten by a fern, and died doing finger guns. Van Talax later accompanied a second expedition ordered by the Lords of Excelsis, But this expedition was lost, as was Ventalix, whose remains were never found. Classic explorer's dilemma. Go poking around in dangerous holes because you heard there was treasure inside. Next thing you know, you're deep in the dark with no way out and something's chewing on your bits. Been there. Era of the Beast. Since the epoch of the Era of the Beast, numerous factions have vied to conquer the Gnarlwood and extract the power held within the vaults of Talaxis. In other words, if the jungle doesn't kill you, the guy next to you definitely will. The mortal realms. Love it. Okay, the next scroll is labeled Exploration, starting with the dangers. Exploration in the Gnarlwood is not for the faint of heart or the faint of hygiene. The variable weather conditions breed infection and disease, causing even minor wounds to fester and seep. Yes, the forest version of a welcome basket, full of pus and regret. But worse, perhaps, is the psychological effect of navigating the seemingly endless, gloomy tangle of the Gnarlwood. A building, hopelessness and paranoia, only exacerbated by the impression that the shifting surroundings actively mock any hope of progress. You know a place is bad when even the trees are gaslighting you. No, I was always here. You must be lost, silly. Only those experienced in traversing the deadliest wilds of the mortal realm stand any chance of survival. Such hardened explorers know that it would be foolish to linger in one location over long, as static camps merely draw down the wrath of the forest upon those misguided enough to sleep in their tents. And trust me, you do not want to wake up with something gnawing on your toes or your scrolls, or both. All temporary dwellings must be surrounded by palisades of sharpened wood and bone to deter hungry predators, and doubly reinforced with defenses both arcane and physical. That's right, defense by magic, by muscle, and by making your tent look like a porcupine got angry at it. Sleeping on the ground is particularly foolish, so instead it is common for travelers in the forest to stay erect, rope bridges and treetop hides which offer limited protection from the beasts that routinely rampage across the forest floor. And don't worry, they say being 20 feet in the air only slightly reduces your chances of being eaten, unless the trees are hungry, which they are. Even then, one must be wary of throttling lianas and wriggling parasites, not to mention the many sharp-eyed predators that dwell amidst the thick canopy overhead. Because the Gnarlwood believes in multi-angle attacks. Ground, dangerous. Trees, worse. Sky, probably carnivorous too. It's basically a buffet, and you're the fondue. Next is titled Sustenance. Sustenance in the Gnarlwood is tricky. There are no supply posts and no wagons or steam crawlers can force their way through the brush. Yeah, your food cart's not making it past a forest that eats the wheels. The only mortal-made resources to be found within the Gnarlwood are those looted from the remains of dead adventurers, barrels and backpacks slumped alongside the remains of their former owners. Just lying there like a really upsetting department store clearance rack. Such grisly discoveries are common, offering perhaps a much-needed keg full of black powder, a collection of scrawled notes revealing the nearby hazards, or a few untainted vials of aqua guaranis. All other supplies must be harvested from the surrounding forest and nothing can be wasted. You haven't lived until you've drunk questionable jungle water from a canteen that used to belong to a guy named Crady Bob, whose skeleton is still clutching a knife. A slain beast provides not only meat but bone from which to craft arrowheads or spears, and sinew for bowstrings and guy ropes. It's basically a butcher shop and hardware store rolled into one that just tried to bite your arm off. The acidic secretions of man-catcher plants can be bottled and hurled as a weapon, or else used to burn through particularly tough obstructions. Dual purpose, 1 part monster goop, 1 part jungle Drano. Now for how to shelter. Only the foolish would attempt to establish permanent camps in the Gnarlwood. But please do, makes finding snacks easier. However, the titanic skulls of primordial behemoths that stumbled unwarily into the Gnarlwood's depths make for excellent defensive positions. Assuming you're okay with sleeping in something that used to think elephants were a light snack, only the ruins of the crashed Seraphon void ship itself may provide temporary sanctuary from the Gnarlwood's many dangers. For many of its shattered ziggurats are still protected by immolating traps and impenetrable fields of celestial energy. Oh, a shelter and a laser show? How thoughtful. Yet no adventurer seeking shelter within their golden walls should think themselves safe, as the protective devices of the Seraphon are indiscriminate in their lethality. Anybody attempting to breach the sacred vaults of the Eye of Chotek risks a swift, painful death, blasted into smoking fragments by dancing beams of starlight, crushed to a gory paste by suddenly shifting walls and ceilings, or swallowed up and spirited away by a seemingly innocuous alcove. I love that it ends with spirited away by a seemingly innocuous alcove. Like, bam! You're a tragic backstory now. Okay, new scroll. This one is headed with locations, looks pretty long. Starting with, Camp Fortune. A name that sounds like a place where you might win big, then immediately get eaten by a tree. The Azyrite explorer Honorio Van Talax was the first of the Free Peoples to discover the ravening ruin and the riches that lay at its center. Van Talax and his company forged a path through the thickest reaches of the living forest whilst fending off relentless attacks by predatory horrors. Ah, yes, the classic combination of jungle hiking and screaming for your life. Despite suffering severe losses, they reached the gleaming ruins at the center of the forest before being driven off by half-feral Seraphon, which is probably the Seraphon version of yelling, "Get off my lawn," while also trying to eat you. Undeterred, Van Talax returned to Excelsis clutching a sack full of priceless treasure and a crudely scrawled map charting his course. And I bet he charged extra for the map. Thanks to his writings and drunken ramblings, the legend of Talaxis was popularized. He swore that the wonders he witnessed in the Gnarlwood's heart were only a fraction of the ruin's true value, and insisted that the God King's faithful must recover the treasures before their enemies could lay hands on them. So basically, he invented fantasy FOMO. Thus, the great lords of Excelsis eventually decreed that another expedition be launched into the depths of Talaxis. Van Talax would return alongside this expedition as a guide and advisor. Because nothing says qualified like a survived once by accident. The second expedition plunged into the Gnarlwood, following the routes Van Talax had charted during his first journey. However, it was soon discovered that the maps were useless, for the gnarloaks that populated the forest had uprooted themselves and moved in search of fresh meat, greatly altering the landscape. Which is just chef's kiss perfect. Imagine hiking for 6 weeks, only to discover the trees moved your destination out of spite. The second venture ended in disaster, and neither Van Talax nor his companions have been seen again. Again, evidence of their passing can be found scattered throughout Talaxis. Moldering skeletons clad in gilded breastplates, abandoned chests filled to the brim with Seraphon artifacts, and the overgrown remnants of makeshift camps. Nothing says epic failure like decorative skeletons and loot that no one gets to use. The largest example of these camps is known as Camp Fortune. Here, the God King's agents discovered Van Talax's lost journals, whose final entries depict a mind descending into madness as he fruitlessly attempts to find a way out of his predicament. Spoiler alert, he did not find a way out. The explorer's corpse has not yet been found, leading some to believe that he and his remaining followers still dwell within the ruins of Talaxis. Or he's become some kind of jungle cryptid now, half man, half moss. All regret. The Tainted Wound, not to be confused with Locke's first attempt at making chili, though same general result. A corruption of bark and blood has infected great swathes of the Gnarlwood, giving rise to mutated gnarloaks that appear more like throbbing, lumpen masses of rotting flesh with profusions of whipping tentacles rather than any plant. Throbbing, living tentacles that try to grab and grope you. I feel like I've read something like that in Japanese literature somewhere. Indeed, several explorers in the Free Cities, who once ventured into the forest and returned, claim to have witnessed heathen warriors sacrificing prisoners to these monstrously corrupted trees in gruesome rituals. Now, I'm not saying don't hug a tree, but maybe ask it if it's going to demand a blood tithe first. One can tell immediately when they are entering the so-called Tainted Wound, for its borders are marked by monstrous, half-living totems and shrines of sinew-lashed bone that radiate the warping energies of chaos. Which is basically Gur for welcome to the neighborhood. Scream into this bone funnel and leave your femur at the door. Next up, the Eater Pits. Spoiler, not a salad bar. The Ogors of the Maw tribes are perhaps the creatures to have most thrived within the Gnarlwoods. These immense, swollen brutes possess an unquenchable appetite, and their guts are strong enough to digest even the notoriously tough gnarloak bark. I once saw an Ogor snack on an iron frying pan like it was a crunchy taco. Real seasoning was the enamel. The Ogor butchers have dug great pits in select glades to honor the gulping god. These pits have sprouted grasping tongues and rows of teeth, seemingly given animus by the Ogor's bizarre faith. Because nothing says divine devotion like building a giant screaming stomach in the woods and throwing strangers into it. Honestly, points for commitment. The butchers regard their creations as something akin to pets and take great delight in hurling prisoners into the fang-lined maws of the Eater Pits. They're like dogs if dogs were sentient sinkholes with a taste for terrified wailing. And now for something slightly less moist, the Canopy of Starlight. Near the center of the Gnarlwood lies the ruined remains of the Eye of Chotek. There, broken segments of ziggurats and massive fractured crystals that protrude the canopy are somehow still unconquered by the rapidly growing plant life. Probably because the plants tried to climb up, saw the maths involved, and noped out. There is enough latent magic in the outer ruins to provide a measure of protection from the elements, and clever explorers have made good use of them. Stone pillars and chunks of shattered obsidian have been strung together by vine plats and rope ladders, forming a treetop settlement known as the Canopy of Starlight. So called because this is the one spot for leagues around where Azir can be clearly seen through the thick canopy of the Gnarlwood. And yes, of course I tried swinging on the rope ladders. And yes, of course, I nearly took out a priest, 2 hammocks, and Locke's dignity. Again. Ah, yes, the great Stinkhorn. My favorite place in all the stinkin', reekin', festering Gnarlwood. And I say that with the deepest affection, like a goblin ant talking about her wart collection. The great Stinkhorn is a mountain mushroom that befouls the forest for miles around with its appalling reek. Within its chambered cap dwell hosts of gloom-spite gits. Surrounding it is a creeping swathe of fungal overgrowth and damp, stinking moss. It smells like fermented goblin socks, dipped in cheese stew, and left to marinate in a squig pen. Beautiful. So Locke and I... Hey, okay. So one time Locke and I actually visited the Stinkhorn, right? Meant to be a quick detour for lore reasons. Quick, he says. 3 days we were stuck there while I tried to introduce him to Night Clan hospitality. I even got him to wear official Git's ceremonial robes. And by got him to wear, I mean tackled him while he was reading and stuffed him into something roughly 3 sizes too small. Looked like a polite sausage at a mushroom rave. He didn't say a word the whole visit, just stood there in that tiny robe while goblins danced around a glowing squig to the beat of a fungus drum. Later told me it was enriching. He had nasty cough for the rest of the week, though. Good times, good times. Locke's scroll says, Talaxis is the central remains of the Seraphon void ship once known as the Eye of Chotek, that harbors a large cache of relics left behind by the Old Ones and collected from across the realms by the Seraphon. While the precise nature of the event that caused it to hurtle down from the etheric void to Gur is unknown, the iridescent flames surrounding some of its ruins leave some hint. Talaxis is uninhabited, save the sparse Seraphon remnants that have gone feral and guard the ruins. Translation: it's a crashed magical space lizard temple full of ancient glowing nonsense and grumpy guardian lizards who bite. So obviously everybody with a bad idea and a death wish wants to go there. Now here's where things get even shinier and more don't touch that unless you want to have tentacles for testicles. The Word Lights is a stretch of the Gnarlwood haunted by immense crackling orbs. Appearing seemingly at random, these eerie spheres unleash flickering tendrils of energy that mutate everything they touch. This phenomenon causes openings to appear in the thick undergrowth, passages that are tempting to exhausted travelers searching for a direct route to Talaxis, until they discover the horrors that await them on the other side. Even the forest seems to retreat wherever the Word Lights shine. Petrified gnarlokes are transformed into writhing tentacles of silver, and luckless adventurers into screaming statues of crystal. The predators that roam here are horrifyingly warped with extra limbs and pulsating growths jutting from their skulls. So basically, it's like being inside a disco ball possessed by Tsinch, one that's very into body horror. Indeed, such is the intense aura of magic radiated by these strange orbs that time itself is distorted beyond all sense. There are tales of warbands that have emerged from the word lights to discover that a journey they believed took mere hours, in fact, lasted over a decade. So if you ever wanted to go in looking for treasure and come out to find your great-grandniece is now your dentist, this is your place. It is not clear whether the word lights possess any sentience beyond a desire to wreak chaotic mutation, but it cannot be a coincidence that they appear only around fragments of the ravening ruin, whose golden statues and obsidian stones alone seem immune to their touch. I mean, they glow, they float, they ruin your life, and they only leave the fancy space ziggurats alone. Coincidence? I think not. Probably the orbs have taste. Many Tsinch worshippers seek out the spheres, believing them manifestations of the Change God's arcane power. Several tribes of Tzangors dwell within the word lights, reveling in the area's unnatural aura. More recently, the jade obelisk hailing from Vexothskull have settled there. Their strange carved monoliths seem to attract the eldritch orbs, absorbing their magical emanations and projecting zones of corruption that keep the encroaching forest at bay. So, in summary, floating chaos disco orbs that rearrange your insides attract birdmen and crystal fanatics, and only respect ancient cosmic reptiles. 10 out of 10 would not vacation again. Okay, next is those who stray into the spine-crawler webs seldom ever emerge. Here, the corpses of long-dead gnarlokes have been wound with hair-thin threads, transformed into a nightmarish cat's cradle of glistening webs. This is the dwelling place of the infamous spine-crawlers, web-spinning arthropods with 1,000 segmented legs that like to attach themselves to the backs of their victims, burrowing through armor and flesh to extract the marrow from their bones. Nothing says warm forest hospitality like spinal excavation via bug. And you thought backpack straps were uncomfortable. And next up, everyone's favorite cautionary tale. Near to the center of the Gnarlwood lie the broken outer sections of the Eye of Chotek, half protruding from razor-sharp thickets of sentient vegetation that attacks anything that comes within reach. This is the elemental defense thrown up by what remains of Talaxis's terraforming engines, a bastion of murderous flora that conceals the heart of the ruined void ship from prying eyes and avaricious minds. Because nothing protects sacred alien relics better than 1,000 murder bushes with trust issues. Yet formidable as this perimeter is, it can be breached, as proved by Honorio Van Talax. Though the great adventurer is now presumed dead, or worse, fragmented evidence of his ill-fated return expedition to the Gnarlwood remains. So if you happen to find a map, some treasure, and a journal filled with desperate screaming, congrats! You're walking Van Talax's path. He did all the hard work so you could die in style. Locke writes, this one is about a structure called Motzalpota's Gaze. The Slan Starmaster known as Motzalpota was once the rightful overlord of the Eye of Chotek, a luminous being of unparalleled wisdom, chosen by no less an entity than Lord Croak himself to safeguard some of the Old One's most powerful relics. He met his end when the void ship struck the surface of Gur, overcome by the strain of maintaining the vessel's arcane ward to ensure it was not utterly destroyed. All that remains of the Slan is a golden statue, an idol crafted by his most trusted skink priests that stands eternal watch over the so-called sundered scales. Honestly, same. If I had to run a flying zoo pyramid full of ancient lizard tech while crash landing into a murder forest, I'd also retire as a glorified lawn ornament. The statue's glittering eyes are fashioned from star crystals, powerful enough to blast the life from any impure creature that dares to look upon it. And its surface is feverishly polished and maintained by a cadre of skink caretakers. They buff that statue like it owes them money or instructions. Probably both. Traumatized by the loss of their master and the lack of instruction in the Great Plan, the skinks have come to believe Motzalpota's spirit still resides in the statue. They worship it, and perhaps their fanaticism is not entirely misplaced. Or maybe he's just watching from the afterlife like, please stop waxing my thighs. And now, a walk through your worst fever dream. To the west lies the Blood-Mad Ravage, a place where the ground has turned to blood-soaked mulch and the air reeks of murder. Headless bodies hang from trees, and even the gnarlokes have mouths full of corpses. Which is honestly kind of rude because those were my snacks. The Khorne bloodbound descended here, driven by some impulse that turned their souls to fire. Upon reaching the Ravage, they butchered everything. Forest beasts, rival war bands, the trees themselves. The Ravage bears the scars of their atrocities still. If you ever wanted to know what it's like inside the mind of a Khorne cultist, just imagine every emotion you have being replaced with the urge to bite a chainsaw. Gore ichor harvested from these gory swamps is now used to consecrate weapons to Khorne. Because apparently what your axe was missing was fermented blood juice. Vintage slaughter pairs well with rage. Locke's final scribble on this locale's scroll reads, "When the Realmgate Wars began, it was the Astral Templars, Sigmar's most storied hunters, who first dared the Gnarlwood and emerged to tell the tale. Even as their armies struck elsewhere across Gore, they never forgot this harrowing campaign. Around its perimeter, they established a network of watchposts to prevent the horrors of the forest from spreading. Slayer's Cliff was among the largest, built where Lord Celestant Rarshoff the Slayer hurled the Auric warlord Magagog into a chasm, breaking the Nextnappus war clan. I've got questions, but I feel like the answers are just Auric screaming and impact sounds. Slayer's Cliff has long stood firm, a rest stop for other storm hosts, if they can handle the Astral Templars' hospitality. Yet even this fortress is weakening. Without reinforcement, the God King's grip on the Gnarlwood may collapse entirely. Which, to be fair, seems kind of inevitable when your neighbors include vampires, chaos cults, sentient trees, and possibly the entire concept of teeth. Speaking of vampires, Count Moltaire, a soul-blight noble with a thirst for drama, has decided that aristocratic blood sports in a nightmare forest is peak leisure. He's petrified a stretch of gnarlokes into a fancy hunting lodge where he and his undead buddies toast each other with goblets of blood and brag about who bagged the most beasties last week. It's like Dracula meets Bass Pro Shop, and I am here for it. But not everyone is into monster hunting. Some vampires are more horde enthusiasts. South of Moltaire's mansion of murder is Strongpoint Tolamar, a Sigmarite outpost under siege by undead armies cobbled together from forest-gnawed skeletons. If the Soulblight attackers aren't stopped, the entire fortress could fall. Which would be tragic, mostly for the living. The dead are just getting free real estate. Ooh, finally, the scroll labeled Ecology, or as I like to call it, things that will eat you first and ask 0 questions later. According to Locke's notes, the Gnarlwood is named for its dominant flora, the carnivorous gnarloak, a tree that walks, stalks, and mauls its meals with all the subtlety of a drunken ogre in a china shop. These ravenous plants creep on root-like limbs and strike when prey is too tired to run, ensnaring the poor soul in muscled boughs and dragging them into a barbed maw. Nature really said, take a nap, lose a leg. And it's not just the plants that are meat-happy. The forest undergrowth is crawling with predators, each one more obsessed with eating you than the last. Behold, the culinary critics of the Gnarlwood. Rataskas. Big angry rat lizards with more teeth than friends. Blood wasps. They sting you, drink your blood, and probably post about it afterward. Shovelhorn rhinoxen. Basically, if a snowplow grew legs and decided to hate you personally. Impaler mantids. You know how regular mantids are bad. These ones can throw you. Thornspine leonaxes. Terrors of the plains, like lions. If lions were nightmare lawnmowers. Vorskalids. They spit acid. Not like figuratively, literally. Their tongue juice is so corrosive that even gold wizards collect it for potion making and probably extremely unwise spa treatments. Garnox. Worshipped by beastmen who pile up meat sacrifices by their dens. Because obviously what you want to do is make friends with the monster. bloodrugs. Terrifying birds of prey that live up in the canopy, presumably because the ground is already booked full of horrors. As for the weather, imagine the forest is your ex. Now imagine the weather is your ex's passive-aggressive cousin. 1 hour it's so hot your armor is melting into your armpits. The next, a monsoon punches you in the face and tries to drown you with sideways rain. The storms are so brutal, they've knocked out entire patrols just by being extra. At this point, the only thing in the Gnarlwood that hasn't tried to kill you is the concept of hope. And I'm pretty sure it's on a waiting list. And that, my dear disaster moths, concludes our latest scribble through the leafy, bitey hellhole known as the Gnarlwood. A forest so alive with danger, it makes dating a Slaaneshi cultist look low risk by comparison. If you ever feel the urge to visit, just remember, the trees will strangle you, the bugs will drain you, the rain will insult you, and if you're lucky, only your feelings will get eaten. But hey, think of the cardio. Next time Locke's sending me a scroll about something with fewer vines and significantly less screaming fungus, I hope. Until then, this is your resident arboreal instigator, Khee, signing off. God bless. You know, one of these days, I am gonna write my own scroll. Something like Khee's practical guide to not dying in a murdered jungle. Chapter 1, don't trust vines, or mushrooms, or shadows, or birds, or honestly, just don't trust anything. Bet mine would sell better than yours too. I'd include drawings, with annotations, and tasteful butt shots. I'd draw diagrams of all the butts in the jungle with comparisons and notes. And no, you're still not getting the Night Clan robes back. They look way better on me, especially from the back. It's called silhouette supremacy, Locke. Look it up. Don't worry, I washed the blood out, most of it.